This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Help. That's right. If there's something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals, or maybe you're experiencing some burnout, go to betterhelp.com/Leo and you'll enjoy 10% off your first month. And if you're like, what is BetterHelp? Tell me more. They will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. That's right. You can start communicating in under 48 hours. It's not a crisis line, it's not self help. It is professional counseling done securely online. BetterHelp is not the right solution for you if you have thoughts of hurting yourself or hurting others. Um, but they do offer a broad range of expertise available, which may not be locally available in many areas. The service is available for clients worldwide. That's the beauty of it, worldwide, wherever you are. Australia, Budapest, Iran, Russia, they have available therapists in your area. And what's really cool is you can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can send and schedule weekly video or phone sessions. That's right. You don't have to ever sit in an uncomfortable waiting room as with traditional therapy. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if needed. How dope is that? It's like if you get a car, you don't like it after a few weeks, you can swap it for free. How cool. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Visit their website and read their testimonials. Go to betterhelp.com/Leo and join the over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health today and get that 10% off your first month. Welcome to another episode of Before You Kill Yourself with your host, Leo Flowers. Today's guest is Marcos Trinidad. Oh, he's a Army veteran and host of the Human Nature podcast. Today we discuss finding your joy, spiritual connections, moving from caution to curiosity, the joy of bird watching, discovering what we're all capable of, and finding purpose in our compulsions. We talk about so much more. Plus, I really love our discussion on nonviolent communication. Let's jump into the episode with Marcos Trinidad.
Going back and thinking, man, I shouldn't have said that. That's like 99% of what I say. I think the good piece is like, I don't dwell on it, right? So I say it, and yeah, I said it. I'm accountable. So we're good, man.
How do you now? Let me ask you this. Because you said you don't dwell on things. You hold yourself accountable. How do you let things go?
That's a great question. I think a lot of it comes with experience of not letting go, and what that does to me, and where it takes me. And I've had a lot of experience of just dwelling on things, and I am grateful that I've had a lot of meditation practice, and I've been able to really study, a lot of the philosophy that goes behind the particular meditation that I do, and part of the understanding of impermanence and us having a cycle that we can constantly play over and over again, which can be that dwelling, that I also have the ability to break. And the more that I step out of these patterns, the stronger the reconnecting of new habits becomes. So the dwelling is less consistent. And man, it's just a practice. It's just a practice of doing it again. I still get pulled into it. And then what ends up happening at that point, it's just like, say I do something and I dwell on it and I'm like, oh man, I should have done this. And then I get that thinking of, oh man, like I know better than this. I've done this before. Like, and then I start beating myself up about like, I should have known better, like to dwell on it. And then that starts a whole nother like pattern. And for me, the ability to wake up, or just the privilege to wake up in the morning, start another day, or each moment, if I have to take it moment by moment, the ability to say, you know what? I'm going to change now. I'm going to shift this now. As soon as I catch it, I'm going to change this now, because that I learned through meditation and focusing on the breath. And when you're deep in meditation, when I hear people, I'm like, oh yeah, I was deep in meditation. Usually for me, that means, man, I was deep in thinking. I was deep in thoughts, which for me is not my purpose of meditation. That was like, I'm sitting there and I'm physically there, but the mind is running. And then when I catch myself, I'm like, oh wow, I was carried away with that thought. I could bring myself back to the breath. And then I focus on the breath and then get back into that meditative state, which I'm trying to accomplish. That's what has taught me to break those patterns of the dwelling and getting attached to that.
That's powerful in terms of coming back to the breath and breaking the meditation and not beating yourself up over the thoughts that you're having, right? Because a lot of times, I relate where I'm beating myself up over something I said or did, and then I realize, oh, I don't have to beat myself up. Like that's not productive. That's not helpful. It's actually letting me off the hook because when I'm beating myself up, I'm not being reflective and I'm not thinking about how I can one interrupt that pattern and two how do I correct it, right? Like when you're in class, your teacher doesn't beat you up, hopefully, for coming up with the wrong answer. She asks you, how did you come up with that answer? How did you arrive there? And then you take steps from there. But you brought up something beautiful, that the idea of impermanence. That's a word that I don't really hear a lot of. And in cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the things they talk about is how nothing is permanent. So, whether you're are feeling depressed or upset or even happy and joyous, no state is permanent. Can you tell me more
Mm,
about what impermanence means for you?
sure. Yeah, man, it's one of those things that I have fortunately been able to experience um, often, and being able to um, I guess contemplate is what I was going to say, and I use contemplate because there's a difference between contemplating impermanence and then dwelling on it. And for a while, when I was introduced to this idea of impermanence that later became a philosophy or just a belief, I'm like, no man, like I'm going to be around forever. My family is going to be around forever. The homies are going to be around forever. This person is going to be around forever, and whatever relationship I'm having is going to be around forever. And then quickly realizing that nope, it's not. And for me, really understanding, or what I believe is the understanding for me, is that um, there are some things in life that we have no control over: people, places, and things. And for a long time, I really didn't understand how that plays out in our lives, and in my life particular, until I started having people in my life pass away, and understanding that, wow, you know what, folks are really not going to be here forever. I'm not going to be here forever. And what are these experiences or memories that I'm going to have of these interactions that I get to have with folks, or spaces? And when I mean by spaces, I'm getting to nature, and which really, where nature is where I think I find all teachings, and that impermanence, when it plays out in nature, is raw. I mean, there's no judgment there. Nature is going to happen, and there's nothing we can do to prevent it, as much as we can. Even me sitting in this room with the carpet and trying to control the audio, right, and trying to control the sound. If the neighbor turns on, or if the neighbor is loud, I could possibly be able to prevent that audio coming in. But just as we were able to see yesterday with our thunderstorms, if nature wanted, nature's going to come through. Nature is going to have this presence. So as nature changes, it's the thing that we can connect to every day that is going to teach us impermanence. When we jumped on, you talked about how hot it is. Regardless of your perception on how hot it is, that perception is not going to change. The fact that the sun is going to come out and we're going to experience it. Tomorrow, it may be a little different. So for me, I look at those examples and I try to connect as much as I can on a daily, just so I can continue to practice how I receive these teachings. Because for me, that idea of impermanence is also very closely related to what I call my motto of remaining teachable. Because if I think I'm around forever, I'm going to stop learning, and I'm here to learn.
Man, I love that. You know, I've had so many people on a podcast talk about how being in nature, um, and views that idea of like there's no judgment, there's no shame, there's no guilt, there's no judge, there's no jury out there. It's all equal, and that's one of the things I love about being in nature. Also, when you think about your childhood, when you think about your history, what was there? Were there moments of judgment for you growing up?
Oh man, always. Man, I grew up in the hood. I grew up in the barrio, and it was in the '80s at the peak of some of the really intense gang violence in Los Angeles. So it was a very different experience. And I say different in comparative, or comparing that to my current reality, and how I choose to or how I'm able to raise my children. And that's the like the thing that is real for me, right? So growing up, we had a lot of um experiences, or at least I was able to experience a lot of struggle. And that's just being a person of color, growing up in Los Angeles, growing up through the uprising in Watts, the 92 riots, living through that, having friends that were in gangs, that were out of gangs, that were trying to survive, and also being in an urban area, in a space that may have not been the most healthy. And I mean that with access to food, access to clean water, clean air, all these things. In that moment, I didn't realize any of this. In that moment, I never felt that I was lacking. I never felt that I was missing all this stuff. This was all retrospect as an adult, thinking back, like, man, I made it through that. Like, man, like we were experiencing these things and not knowing that we were going against the grain or that we were just surviving, barely surviving. This was us like living life. So now as I think back and reflect on childhood, like those moments when my family struggled, with paying bills or healthy food options, like it wasn't about like, wow, we're really in a tough place this month. It was just like, well, you know what, this is what we eat. We, hot dogs with a tortilla, and you warm that up. you know, Back then it was like we were eating spam sandwiches, spam and eggs. Now we look at that, man. You go to some of these food trucks selling, spam and rice and charging $10. So when we look at this judgment or non-judgment, it's how do we choose to react now that we're adults and reflect back on our childhood. And I used to catch myself feeling really sad and down about my childhood. But in that moment, I wasn't tripping in the same way. Like in that moment, I was happy to be a child. I was happy to be with friends. I found joy in eating those meals with family. It wasn't until an adult placing judgment on those experiences because I felt that I was doing without. And it was society telling me, oh, you're an at-risk youth. Oh, you have all these things that you need to fix. Oh, you are now in a space that needs to be corrected. And going through that period has allowed me to reflect in a very different way, where I'm able to bring in this idea of non-judgment and place it. And you know what? When I was a kid, man, I was having a good time. And I wasn't thinking, like, I didn't get up and think like, well, let me go walk these streets and find my friends and have these urban experiences in the hot sun. No, it was like, man, I couldn't wait to get up in the morning, call up the homies, or just back then we just show up on the front door, knocking on the door or yelling from the street, hey, and come out. Then you go to the next house. So I think when we think of judgment as adults and reflect on that, I think we're being pretty harsh on ourselves. I don't want to take away from anyone's experience where they did experience harm and trauma. But for me, what I initially characterized as trauma and harm was really, or is now being interpreted as experiences with the chance of growth. And that has taken a lot for me as an adult, like, or, just to get to that space.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think a lot of people go to a bar or a nightclub as a space for non-judgment, right? It's like you go in a bar, it's dark, the music's loud, so it's like you're numbing all your senses, and it's like we're all drinking, we're all getting drunk, so no one can judge in here. We can all reduce ourselves to our lowest common denominator and not feel judged. But, what I love about your message is it's about also realizing that nature is a place for non-judgment. How did you make that part of your mission or your purpose to get other people into nature? Is this something that your parents espoused, or is this something that you stumbled on through a mentor or by accident?
No, man, like I'm glad you brought that up because it it was through experience. I was looking for that non-judgment in those places too. So, hitting up the bars and the clubs and not finding it. Where else are you gonna check? So just consistently on the search. When I realized that nature was something to be had, I was in the military, and there was um, a number of times that I was, had to go through a certain amount of training. I mean, boot camp, and then you go out to some extended job training. And for me, joining the military at 17 was a big deal. Like, I couldn't even sign myself up for the military. I had to have both of my parents sign their kid away, their baby away. Next thing you know, Fort Knox, Kentucky. Um, First time away from home, first time out of Los Angeles, first time, you know, anyone from my family uh and at this generation had volunteered to join the military. So there was a lot. But getting into that experience, also really not understanding. Man, have you talked to 17-year-olds lately? I can't believe I joined the military at 17, you know. But it was a different time. And so getting to a space, I remember talking to the recruiter. I want a job that will give me time to go to school while I'm in the military. I want to go to Europe, and I also want a non-combat job. And the recruiter saying, "All right, we got you. We got the perfect job for you." So then rolling out to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and being in the woods for the first time, and getting to a space where I started feeling different seasons. I showed up in summer. The biggest guy I ever seen in my life walks in the room. He was our first sergeant, and looks around the room and addressing 300 new troops, and is walking around and saying, "You guys have signed up to be 19 Delta Cavalry Scouts, one of the most dangerous jobs United States Army has to offer." And I'm sitting there thinking, like, wait, hold up. I signed up for a non-combat job. So, I raised up my hand. I'm like, oh, there must be a mistake. I signed up for a non-combat job, and then having about 5 drill sergeants in my face telling me all what they were going to do. And I could just sit. I was there, and it was almost like you could just see the mouths running. And I'm thinking back in my head, talking to the drills, or talking to the recruiter, and he's saying, "Trinidad, whatever you do, just fly under the radar. Like, you don't want to make a name for yourself, just fly under the radar." And I'm sitting there thinking, like, man, I jacked that up, because it was 15 seconds into the first day, and everyone knew who Trinidad was. And just having that amount of pressure and stress. And it pretty much was my experience of boot camp. I mean, they broke me down. When I started to rebuild myself was when I was out in nature and sitting in a foxhole, or hiking. We used to call it well, it was ruck marching, but it can be interpreted as hiking. I mean, we had boots on and carrying all our gear, but not being able to chit chat or talk or do anything, just be in that space. I didn't know what was happening at the time, but as I was being broken down by the training and they were rebuilding me, the experience in nature was healing me. And I didn't really understand how that was happening, how it was working. And eventually, going through boot camp, being very comfortable being in the woods, they pretty much trained me to a point where I could not like get lost in the wilderness. As long as I had a map and compass, I could not get lost. So there was a level of comfort there. So when they shipped me out to Germany, they did give me Europe out of the three things I asked for. Southern Germany, having this experience, there were moments just going through some training and being in the woods and then finding that peace. And then understanding that, wow, this is when I have this spiritual connection. Not really knowing at that moment that it was a spiritual connection, not knowing at that moment that I was being healed and that I was open to receiving that healing. Those were the moments that I would come back to later as an adult, understanding that nature is one way that we can reconnect, not just to each other as people, but reconnect to the land as our ancestors have done and had that relationship. So coming out to that, after living out in Europe for some time, coming back to the United States and figuring out, okay, what am I going to do for work? Getting to a point where I was able to start studying, geology and anthropology and these things that were these studies that were putting me back out into nature, is when I really made the connection that all of this was happening. And that if I could create opportunities that would put other people in that situation and provide those experiences, that I wouldn't have to be the camp counselor. I just had to make the introduction. Nature would do the rest. And that's where the real healing started, because not only was I in a space that I can heal myself from whatever it was that needed healing. When you realize that you're opening doors or providing experiences for other people to do that, there's a whole nother world that brings healing onto it. And man, I know you know what I'm talking about when you're able to help people and how it helps us in that same time.
Absolutely. One of the things that stand out about what you said, because you're talking about connection and healing and how there were 300, 17, 18-year-old boys on a cusp of becoming men, but still, we know the male brain doesn't really fully develop until 25. So it's still a long way off. What were some of the things you remembered and still to this day employ, um, in terms of people from such a range of backgrounds and energy connecting? How did they get you all to connect and bond, or did you feel like you weren't able to bond and connect with the 300 other military men or people?
Um, man, that's deep. That's deep. Because I ran the range of it all. You know, there were folks that I was able to connect with, and then there were folks that it did not happen. And the thing about the military, um, and that training and that situation and those circumstances, it's some of the most valuable experiences that a person can go through. And this is the difficulty in trying to explain it, because I can't fully explain what goes on, because there are no words to really to hit what you're learning. But in those experiences, you learn just how cruel and how horrible people can get. You learn what we are all capable of. Just that really dark, dark space. And at the same time, you learn how amazing and and honorable and just beautiful people can be. And so for that experience to really happen for me at such a young age is what I believe to be a huge part of how I got to where I am, and just my view on life. Because um, you know, when we are put in really stressful places, or put in really stressful, scary situations, we are able to see what we are capable of and what our potential is. And sometimes we don't know which way we're going. Are we going to be that really horrible person, or are we going to be that really honorable person? Because we have the the capabilities and the abilities to be all of that. So for me, I think the relationships that I was able to build, based off of being in a really scary place, in a really at times lonely place, allowed me to understand that when I set intention to be open to receive help, and also the learn like the teachings, the learnings, then that interaction can happen. And the more I train myself and practice being that person that I want to be, the easier it's going to be in those really stressful situations. So that connection is getting stronger. And there's all sorts of medical explanations of how that works. And it's the reason why the military trains so much, because you get that muscle memory, you also get that brain memory, those connections. You start to feel those connections. And I think for me, understanding and going through that now, back then, I was telling you, I'm a 17-year-old. You hit it. Our brains don't fully develop until way later. And by that time, there were a lot of substances that were keeping my brain from developing fully. So now as an adult and having these interactions, um, I'm able to choose which interactions I favor, because of the effect and how they play out in my life, and just where I want to be as a person in this society.
I have listeners who are listening from all over the world, in Iran, in Portugal, China, Budapest, Africa, all over. And so many people are struggling with drug addiction. And you've mentioned, I think twice now, substances. Could you share? Are you willing to share what those substances were? so that the listeners can hear that they're not alone in what they're struggling with. And then they also can hear of someone who was struggling with it. And I'm assuming now you're not struggling with those same substances currently.
Yeah, for sure. I am definitely willing to share. So alcohol was a big part of my life. I mean, 17 years old in Germany, man, I learned how to drink with the greats. And that was the good beer. So if you have folks that are listening out in Germany, you know, nothing can touch that. um, and getting to a space that or getting to a space where the substance was no longer something that I was using, but something that was addicting and changing behavior and just numbing and separating any connections that I did have with people or motivation in doing things was something that I had to realize. And then, of course, you know, back then it wasn't legal, but it's legal now. You know, marijuana, weed, all that stuff. Growing up in LA, and you know, messing around with the wide variety of things. But for me, the real struggle was alcohol, because with that, all bets were off. You know, after that first drink, it didn't matter what was next, right? So understanding that I was powerless over that first drink, or after that first drink, um, is what allowed me to start setting intention on where I wanted to take my life and how I wanted to live my life. And now, me being 12 years sober, it has drastically changed. So it's not that I don't struggle with alcohol. I don't struggle with the fact that I want to be a better person. And when I was drinking or using any other substance, I didn't care. I didn't care whether I was a good person or not. It just wasn't a thing I thought about. It wasn't until I felt really lonely and the uncertainty and just lack of motivation and wanting to have this spiritual connection and this understanding that got me to a point that I was scared and willing to do whatever it would take to change that up. And the again, coming back to this idea of impermanence, you know, and my beliefs, I needed to to do something. I couldn't just get to a point where I gave up and not try to figure out not just a solution, a treatment, but a new way of life. And that's what got me to this space now.
Talk to me about you said, you know, you got to a place where you were scared. And I for at least for myself, I know, and for so many people, that's something that a lot of us, especially as adults, we don't cop to. We don't admit that I'm scared. That's something that children are. Children get scared. Kids get scared. Adults, you know, we got to be tough. We got to have grit, be resilient. Um, but to admit that we're scared, that we are fearful of, talk to me more about what you were scared of and what you're now scared of.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you were saying. It's just as an adult, you know, we don't get scared. I've never seen my parents scared. They never showed any fear. They always had all the answers. And I think as parents and as adults, we put on that front. And I don't know if that is what we should be doing for our children. And with me, getting to a place where I was scared, it was really about not having the answers, understanding that, man, here I'm an adult. I just accomplished the first real goal I had set for myself as a young adult, which was join the military, get some college money, travel the world, do all these great things. And then here I am at, 22, 23, not knowing what to do with my life. Which, tell me which 22, 23-year-old does know what to do with their life, right? But also feeling this sense that I didn't have any answers, and looking for some spirituality, looking for a connection, looking for something that was greater than myself, and not being able to find it. That's what got me to a place that okay, well, what can I find? Can I find it in that drink? Can I find it in that substance? Can I find it in whatever these compulsive behaviors are? And so when you're constantly looking for something and not finding it, that's scary, man. And so getting to a place that was dark, because I was not only not finding what I was looking for. One, I didn't even know what I was looking for. Like, how are you going to find something you don't know that you're looking for? And then two, not being able to make any real connections with anyone else because of it. And separating myself from any meaningful relationships or connections that I had, and not really understanding how to process that, because it wasn't laid out for me. No one said, hey, this is how you deal with this. Like, oh, you're feeling sad, here's some things you can do. And then fresh off of a military term, man, we don't give up. We don't show weakness. That was training that was very real. You get whatever it is you need to do, you get it done. And that's where I think I got to a point that was really scary for me, in being able to find anything that was solid, like to find something that I can rest on, that I can take as a sign that there was something greater than myself. And bringing it back to nature, when I was in nature, those were the moments that I was able to feel that I was not alone. Understanding that the world was going to spin with or without me. Birds were going to sing, bugs were going to bug, the wind was going to blow. And understanding that there is like a purpose to all of this. And now just finding that motivation that I had to see what my purpose was in that whole scheme of things.
Yeah, you're how long you been married, Marcos?
Going on, man, about 16 years I've been with my partner.
So 16 years, and you have two children, a boy and a girl.
Yep.
How, you talked about parents presenting as perfect. How do you correct for errors with your children? And let me restate that another way. I used to work in a group home, and there'd be times where I might say something, or I might punish a kid for something, and then I look back and I realize that I'd made a mistake and I need to apologize or make amends. How do you do that with your children? And how do you teach them to do that with each other, if at all? Maybe you don't apologize. You just like, they'll figure it out.
Yeah. Man, thank you for that question, because and I that's what I need to hear. I need to hear, how do I apologize to my children? Because I can't apologize to them enough. It's just, uh, I need to apologize for things that I'm going to do in the future. Like that's real. If we're being real with it, if we're having that real talk, I need to apologize for all the times I'm going to goof up in the future, because it's going to happen. I think now I'm comfortable with making those mistakes and being that fool. I'm comfortable with opening myself up and not having to project this machismo way of doing things. The kids know that I was in the military. They know that the job that I was doing is a job that folks are very proud of. If you're a scout, you're a scout. If you done recon, that's your thing. So there's a lot of that comes out. But what I make sure of that outshines that is that daddy is also capable of showing love. And daddy is also capable of learning. And for me, again, coming back to what am I doing today to remain teachable? When I'm wrong, promptly admit it. Those are things that I need to do, because if I can apologize for doing something wrong, or you know what, hey, my bad, like I'm already like ready to yell at the kid, or come out with one of my wisecracks. But yet, how am I modeling that behavior? Are these things that I value in our family? How am I modeling those things? And man, I'll tell you, when we first uh, had Paloma, and Paloma's my oldest, we wanted to revolutionize parenting, like everything. We had the cloth diapers. We're bringing it back. Uh, Cloth diapers. We lived in a tiny home. We wanted to lower our carbon footprint. When the baby started eating solids, we didn't feed her anything we didn't grow for her. I mean, it was taking it back. And then when our son came out, we're like, well, maybe we could just do organic. And then changing that, but also changing how we parent, changing the idea that we had to scare our kids into behaving. So adopting these things that were completely foreign to us, like nonviolent communication. It's like, what's that? Trying to explain that to my family. Or, oh, we don't communicate like that. We don't say, hey, get down from that tree, you're gonna fall. We say, hey, be mindful of your footing, because you want to make sure that you're avoiding, any potential to fall.
Can
So
Marcos? Can you? I could feel like my listeners right now are just going crazy because nonviolent communication is something that, or I don't want to say going crazy, but they're just lit up right now as I am. It's not something that we hear of often. And so, can you give me an example of? You kind of gave us an example of talking to your kids, and then can you give us an example of nonviolent communication with your wife? Like, what was a past example of you reframing something in a nonviolent way, communicative way?
yeah. um, so nonviolent communication is a way of really tapping into um, how we communicate, coming from a place of love, and trying to communicate with truth, with facts, without manipulating whoever we're communicating to behave the way that you want them to behave. And one clear example of that, at least for me growing up, was, we always listened to our parents because, who are we to question our parents? You don't talk back, you don't ask questions after you're told to do something, you just make it happen. Parents would say, hey, come over here. You see that man? That man's going to get you. Come over here. Just so we would be able to listen. And then we wonder why all these kids that we're looking, we say, hey, hi and wave. And then they're just looking at you with the side eye, but like, I think that's that man that my mama told me about. Like, is that the guy that's going to get me? Or like I was getting into when we see kids playing, because children are naturally curious. Like that's something that is a gift when we're born, that curiosity. As an adult, we learn to push curiosity to the side. And then we start, moving on the side of caution. But that the difference would be if you see a child playing, say they're jumping on a rock or climbing a tree, and you're scared that something might happen to them because we love our children so much and we don't want to be rushing to the emergency room, we would say something like, hey, get down, you're going to fall. Or be careful, that's going to hurt you. And in reality, like, why do we think that? Because there's the potential of children falling or something happening. But instead, we'll use that fear where we're already condemning it. We're already like, okay, this is what's going to happen. I'm using fear to control your decision because you're not going to want to fall. So you're going to listen to what I have to say. And then you're going to come over here, sit by me, and I'm not going to have to worry about it. Or you can communicate in a way that is going to lay out options and lay out an alternative narrative that is going to keep your child alert and also confident in being able to stay curious. And so if the kid or my child was climbing rocks, I would then get into action and not be the lazy parent that just wants to control the kid and say, hey, you're going to fall, get over here. I'd step up and say, what can I do to support my child's curiosity? And then say, hey, be mindful. Make sure when you're putting your hands in areas, you're watching, you're doing this because there is the potential danger. And not using fear to control any of those decisions or behaviors that I ultimately want. And it was a shift in mind because I would communicate this way with our kids in front of family members. And they're like, why do you talk to the kid like that? Like, they don't understand what you're saying. Like, why do you talk to them? Like, they should just listen to what you're saying. And we were, my partner and I, we had joined this co-op. It was a preschool that was all about being outdoors. It was all about nonviolent communication. It was all about finding an alternative way to raise your children in an urban environment. And it was the best decision we had made as first-time parents, as young adults, for our family. And it really challenged us to go beyond us just reliving that generational trauma of being told what to do based off of fear. So for us, it gets to that point now today, like I still see that old trauma coming out because then it's a lot of work, man. It's a lot of work to have to go into that narrative. And there are moments when you're doing something, you're like, you know what? Because I said so. and you get back to that. Or if you do this, then this is going to happen. How do you avoid that? And it's just like, man, I'm not trying to get down to your level. And you make I and I, like all the bending down and up and down squatting I was doing, and it's like getting down to your level. I'm glad my kids are getting older because they're about my height. So now I only have to, crouch a little. But you think about these things and how we communicate to children and each other. And man, that's cruel. Like the way we talk down at children and us acknowledging that violence. So now when it gets to my partner and how we communicate to each other, like there's those periods where we were going through where I'm like, well, I hear what you're saying. Well, I feel this way. And it's just like, hold up. Don't use that shit with me. Don't use that nonviolence with me. We're going to have an argument. And this is going to potentially be violent language. So it's also understanding, like, how do we break these habits, not just with how we communicate with children, with our children, but how do we communicate with each other when we're not trying to get something out of it?
Well, and I'm glad that you showed both sides of that spectrum, because I think a lot of times when we learn skills and techniques in terms of how to communicate with nonviolence, or we learn like a meditation practice or whatever, we feel like we always have to stick to the script. And as you shared, we have to leave space to make a mess. We have to leave space to just let it fly out however it flies out, and hope that we can clean up the mess later. And so there are times where he goes, when you do this, I feel that. And then there are times where it's just do it because I said to do it. It's like, if you're in an emergency situation, you got some active shooter uh, thing going down. That's not the time to express yourself in a very loving and kind manner. It's like, run this way, go grab that, house is on fire. There are times where we have to be direct from a place of love. And then there are other times where we can connect from a place of love. Now, Marcos Trinidad, I know you're a big bird watcher. What I've seen bird watchers in movies and TV shows. What are you watching for? I understand people watching, but what are you looking at when you're looking at birds? What are you watching for?
Right, man. I'm just, like I said, I'm looking for connection and observing behavior. I think for me, as I watch birds, I have learned that birds are here to tell us a story if we're willing to listen. They got these beautiful songs, man, always singing. Sometimes they're singing when we're trying to get some sleep. I've been recently hearing folks in the urban environment talking about these mockingbirds getting going real earlier than usual, around 3 a.m. or all night. But for me, it's really a moment to find out where I am mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because I could look at a bird one morning and see nothing. And those are the days that I'm rushing. Those are the days that I'm not taking care of myself. Those are the days I just drink coffee all morning and I don't have breakfast. Those are the days that I have a million things to do. Then there's the days that I get to look through binoculars, or not even look through binoculars. I can just watch behavior. I can watch interaction. I can watch a relationship that birds have with the environment, that now we're bringing in this non-judgment, that are just being. Birds are the one wild animal that we can have an interaction with every day. I mean, you literally have to go out of your way to not have an interaction. I mean, close up your windows, make sure you're not looking out the window because you'll see a bird fly by. What are they telling us? The cool thing about birds is that they could tell us the health of our communities when we're listening, when we get to learn something about birds. If you're seeing only pigeons or only gulls in your neighborhood, that's telling you something, and it's not dogging on pigeons or those particular birds. It's based off of what their behaviors are. They're not that scared of humans, so they'll be around us. They can live off of our trash. They're over there at In and Out where I am, and then they're also chilling in the park. If you see, say, a spotted towhee, or if you see, a wren tit or one of these other birds that have a specialized diet that only eat a particular type of seed, that is telling you that that plant or that tree needs to exist in your neighborhood. And if that plant or tree exists in your neighborhood, that's telling you that the soil needs to be healthy enough to sustain that plant or tree. So you start to learn that there's something bigger there. Migratory birds coming through. We can even get down to the science of climate change and all these things. But for me, there is just this beauty that birds are able to share, and they're so willing to share that beauty with us that it allows me and motivates me to share some of that beauty that I may have.
I love that. When I played college football, every day as practice was about to start, our coach, not Shadell, gosh, I forget his name, but he would say, "The sun's shining, birds are singing. Beautiful day for football." And to this day, when I go outside, I have that on repeat in my brain. Sun shining, birds are singing. It's a beautiful day for football. Now, you're the host, to wrap up here, Marcos. You're the host of Human Nature Podcast. What's your goal with that? What's your mission with the Human Nature Podcast?
So what we want to accomplish with human nature is to show that humans and nature are not separate. We are a part of nature. And we have these beautiful examples of nature and us coexisting with an urban environment, an urban area, and nature. And so with the podcast, we highlight stories and we tell these stories of nature existing against all odds. We have a number of episodes that focus on particular species of plants or trees, or in one episode, butterfly, the Palos Verdes blue butterfly, which happens to be the rarest butterfly in the world, existing right in our backyards. So the goal is really to put us in a space where we can open ourselves up to observation. And even though we have very busy lives in the city, even though we're in the hustle of city life, we can have a natural experience when we open ourselves up to that.
Marcos, Trinidad, last question. I ask this of all my guests because I always imagine there's one person listening in who may be on the precipice of wanting to end their life. Before you kill yourself, what would you say to them, Marcos?
You're not alone. You're not alone. And the world is and can be better with you in it. Reach out.
Thank you so much, Marcos. Thank you so much, listeners, for tuning in. Remember, this podcast is not a substitute for you going to reach out, seeking help, walking out in the woods, listening to the birds. Share your pain with the birds out there. Call 1-800-SUICIDE or 1-800-273-TALKS or any of the international phone numbers that are listed in each and every single one of the show notes. If you can't call, you can text, you can message. There are group chats, there are Facebook groups, there's online communities. There is help for you somewhere. If you are financially struggling, there are services also listed in the show notes that can help you connect and get financial assistance for mental health. You can always go to thrivewithleo.com for one-on-one coaching with yours truly. Let's get to tomorrow together. Thank you so much, Marcos.
Thank you for having me.